I woke to the hiss of the oxygen line and the antiseptic sting in my nose. My throat was raw from the tube they'd pulled out an hour earlier. Heart surgery, the kind where they crack you open and hope the machine keeps you alive long enough to stitch you back together. The nurse was adjusting the 4 when I asked, "What time are my relatives picking me up?" She froze for half a second, not long enough for most people to notice, but I've spent a lifetime catching the flicker in people's eyes when they're about to lie. "There's no one listed to pick you up, Mr. Ramos." I frowned. "My niece called yesterday. Said they'd be here. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know your thoughts." The nurse bit her lip, checking the chart like the truth might be hiding between the lines. "They were notified you'd be ready for discharge, but no one's come, and your ride home slot has been given to another patient." The words didn't make sense at first. I'd signed a house over to her in the will, paid off her husband's last business loan, spent the past 3 years covering her mortgage when the pandemic chewed up his income. She calls me Uncle Daniel like it's still the nickname from when she was 6 and clinging to my leg at family barbecues. And now nothing. "They're not coming?" My voice was quieter than I meant. "I'm sorry," the nurse said, lowering her eyes. "Would you like us to arrange a social worker? They can find you a temporary care home until—" "No," I cut in, my hand curling over the bed rail. "No care home." The nurse gave a polite, professional nod and left. The room felt bigger without her in it, but not in a good way. It was the kind of emptiness that pressed on your ribs. I stared at the pale blue wall until the hum of the machines became a steady background drumbeat. My phone sat on the table, screen dark. No calls, no messages, just silence. It took me exactly 3 minutes to understand what had happened. They thought I'd be too weak, too grateful to be alive, to question their absence. They'd wait a polite week or 2, then call about the will, about next steps for the house, the accounts, the savings. They'd get nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not the cash in my checking account. And if I played it right, they'd lose more than just their imagined inheritance. They'd lose the roof over their heads and the credit they'd been quietly bleeding into the red for years. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the pain like a hot wire under my ribs. The floor was cold. Good, it sharpened me. This wasn't about anger anymore. Anger burns fast and leaves you hollow. This was about precision, calculation, timing. I picked up the phone, scrolled past her name, Alicia, and tapped another. "Law Office of Carter and Hale," a voice answered. "This is Daniel Ramos. I need to speak to Mr. Hale about immediate revisions to my estate." The silence on the other end was brief but telling. Hale had been my attorney for 20 years. He knew I didn't call unless it mattered. "I'll put you through." While I waited, I pictured Alicia's face when she realized the will was no longer a safety net but a locked door. How quickly her tone would shift from warm concern to the brittle edge of panic. "Daniel," Hale's voice came on, smooth and steady as always. "What happened?" "I just got out of surgery," I said. "And I just found out my family left me here. Alone. I want every asset moved to a charitable foundation. Effective immediately. Everything. Everything," I said. "And I want it ironclad. No contests, no loopholes." Hale exhaled slowly. "I can do that. But what about them?" "They'll still have what they've already taken from me," I said, my voice tightening. "And the debts they're sitting on. I won't touch those. Let the creditors have their turn." It was the first time since waking that I felt the weight in my chest ease, and it had nothing to do with the heart surgery. The plan was already forming. This wouldn't just be a closed door. It would be a door they'd walk into face first. I lay back against the pillows, the 4-pump clicking softly beside me, and allowed myself a small smile. They thought the hospital was the worst place I could be. They were wrong. This was the war room. And the war had just begun. By the time Hale arrived at the hospital, I'd already turned the bland white tray table into a command desk. Phone charger plugged in. Notepad open. Pen poised like a scalpel. He walked in wearing the same charcoal suit he'd worn to Maria's funeral 3 years ago. Back then, he'd offered condolences. Today, his nod carried something closer to recognition, a silent acknowledgement that the man in the bed wasn't here to lick his wounds. "You're sure about this?" he asked, setting a thick leather folder on my lap. They left me here after open heart surgery. Hale. My voice was calm, almost conversational. That was the test. They failed it without hesitation. Now we see how they handle the consequences. He studied me for a moment, weighing my tone. All assets to the Ramos Foundation? Yes. Property, accounts, investments. Everything tied to my name. I tapped the folder. And I want the transfer date to be today. Not next week. Not when you have time. Today. He flipped the folder open, revealing crisp legal forms, each one a piece of my old life ready to be dismantled. I began signing, my hand steady despite the dull ache in my chest. We worked in silence until the nurse came in to check vitals. She glanced at the documents, but said nothing. Smart woman. When she left, I set the pen down. Now the second part. Hale raised an eyebrow. Which is? I want a full credit report on Alicia and her husband. Every loan, every line of credit, every late payment. If my name's attached to anything, I want it flagged. His lips curved slightly. Cosigner exposure? I nodded. She's been living like she already had the inheritance in her pocket. If that's true, she's leveraged against it. Remove the inheritance, you remove the collateral. Then the lenders will do the rest. Hale closed the folder. You're turning your estate plan into a weapon. I met his gaze without blinking. I'm turning neglect into debt. I'm just not the one who'll be paying it. The 4-pump clicked again, and for the first time since waking up, it didn't sound like a countdown. It sounded like a metronome, keeping pace with the new rhythm in my head. Alicia's husband, Mark, was the type who bought shiny trucks with 6-year loans and convinced himself it was an investment. I'd helped him cover 2 missed payments last winter. He'd thanked me with a handshake and gone right back to weekend golf trips. Now I pictured the moment his lender called to inform him the cosigner had transferred all assets out of reach. The moment he realized Uncle Daniel wouldn't be riding to the rescue this time. Hale stood. I'll have the paperwork filed and the transfers initiated before close of business. And Daniel? Yes. Don't answer their calls. Let the silence do the work for you. I smiled faintly. Silence will be the prelude. The work's just starting. When he left, I leaned back against the pillow and watched the winter light filter through the blinds. A week ago, I'd been another old man counting on family for comfort in his final chapters. Today, I was something else entirely. Not a victim. Not a patient. A creditor. And creditors collect. The discharge papers came at noon. The nurse smiled kindly, offered a wheelchair to the curb, and assumed someone would be waiting to help me into a car. No one was. I stepped out into the cold on my own, the stitches tugging under my ribs. The hospital lobby behind me smelled of bleach and resignation. The air outside smelled of winter and freedom. I didn't go home. The taxi dropped me in front of Hale's office downtown. 10 floors up, the elevator doors opened to the quiet hum of an operation where people still understood the power of paper. Hale was already in his conference room, a spread of documents laid out like cards in a rigged deck. Credit pulls on both Alicia and Mark, he said, sliding 2 thick packets toward me. I had a friend expedite it. Nothing illegal, just favors. I opened Alicia's file first. The numbers hit me harder than the cold air outside had. 3 credit cards, all near max home equity line of credit, $42,000 drawn, payments inconsistent. Mortgage, 2 months behind. I moved to Mark's file. It was uglier. Auto loan in arrears, $18,000 balance. Small business credit line in default, $27,000 outstanding. Personal loan from an online lender, 29% interest, late fees stacking like bricks in a wall. My name appeared twice. Cosigner on their mortgage. Cosigner on the business loan. If either fell, the debt would come hunting for me. Figures they didn't mention this when they left me in a hospital bed, I muttered. They were banking on your will, Hale said. Your assets were their safety net. Without it, they're falling without a parachute, I finished. I leaned back, scanning the timelines. They'd built their lifestyle on a foundation they didn't own mine. That made the next move simple. Hale, I want every lender on these accounts to receive updated contact information, I said. Mine, He gave me a questioning look. If they think I'm still liable, I want them to call me. And when they do, I'll have questions that trigger reviews, freezes, maybe even early recalls on the loans. You're tightening the noose, he said. I tapped the mortgage entry. No, I'm just stepping back and letting gravity do what it does. We spent the next 2 hours drafting letters, each one a precise, clinical tool. Not threats, not accusations, just enough professional curiosity to make any cautious lender sit up straight. By the time I left, the sun was dropping behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the snow. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Alicia. I let it ring out. Halfway to the curb, I paused and looked up at the black glass of the office tower. Somewhere in there, Hale's assistant was already scanning the letters, sending them to banks, credit unions, mortgage processors. I thought about Alicia opening her mail in a week, the polite but unmistakable messages from her lenders, each one a reminder that the ground under her was no longer stable. They've left me alone in a hospital bed. I was going to leave them standing in quicksand, and I wouldn't have to lay a finger on them to make it happen. The first crack came faster than I expected. 3 days after Hale sent the letters, my phone rang just after breakfast. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with the kind of focus you give to a rattlesnake in tall grass. Mr. Ramos, this is Jordan from Northwest Mortgage Services. We're calling regarding your cosigner status on the Mark and Alicia Herrera loan. We've received new information and would like to discuss repayment structure. Please call us back within 24 hours to avoid escalation. Avoid escalation. I smiled. That's mortgage speak for, we smell trouble and we're coming closer. An hour later, another voicemail. Different lender. Same tone. By noon, it was 3 calls. By the end of the day, 5. I never called them back. Instead, I forwarded every message to Hale. Log them, I wrote. No responses until I say so. That night, as I sat in my recliner with the porch light off, a text came from Alicia. Uncle Daniel, we need to talk. Please. It's urgent. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hospital. Just the same entitled urgency she'd inherited from her mother's side, the kind that assumes your time, your money, your life are theirs to tap at will. I didn't reply. Silence, as Hale said, was a weapon. And right now, it was cutting clean. The next morning, I parked across from their street in an old sedan I keep for winter. Not the truck they'd recognize. At 8:12, Mark came out in work boots and a jacket too thin for the frost, phone pressed to his ear. His pacing was sharp, fast, agitated. I didn't need to hear the words to know the conversation. I've had enough of them in my banking years. The lender's voice calm but firm, the borrower's tone shifting from charm to bargaining to desperation in a 3-minute arc. He hung up, stood in the driveway for a long moment, then got in his truck and drove off slower than usual. That's the speed of someone doing math they don't like. 2 days later, the first visible impact landed. A notice taped to their front door, bright orange, just like I'd hoped. Mortgage delinquency warning. Big enough letters for every neighbor to see. I didn't need to take a picture, but I did. Documentation matters. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the photo in front of me, and made my next move. A simple email to a contact at the credit union holding Mark's business loan. As guarantor, I have concerns regarding the borrower's financial stability. Requesting full account status and any recent changes in repayment history. Nothing inflammatory, just a trigger. And triggers, once pulled, don't stop halfway. By the weekend, their world would start to tilt. This was the first strike, light enough they could still pretend it was coincidence. But deep down, they'd know. Something had shifted, and the ground under them wasn't going to hold. The orange notice was gone the next day, ripped from the door, no doubt before the neighbor's morning dog walks. But removing a piece of paper doesn't erase the debt behind it. By Monday, the quiet pressure I'd set in motion began to hum. Lenders don't operate on my timetable. They operate on theirs, a slow, grinding wheel that doesn't stop once it's turning. At 9:17 a.m., Hale forwarded me an email chain between the mortgage company and the credit union. My request for account status had triggered what's called a full review, a polite way of saying, we're about to decide if we still trust you with our money. Full reviews come with questions. Questions come with document requests. And those requests stack faster than overdue bills. By mid-afternoon, Alicia called. Twice. Then texted, "Uncle Daniel, please, we just need to explain. I know things looked bad, but we were going to pick you up from the hospital. It's just complicated." I stared at the message, picturing her sitting at that granite kitchen island I'd paid for, thumbs tapping while the first real fear in years crawled under her skin. She called again an hour later. I let it ring out. That evening, as the December cold settled in, I went for a walk, not for exercise, but for observation. I took the long route that curved around their block. The curtains were drawn, but light spilled through the gaps. Mark's shadow paced the living room. Another figure, Alicia's, sat still at the dining table, a phone on speaker. I could almost hear the scripted apologies, the veiled reassurances to whatever lender they were trying to charm. Charm doesn't pay arrears. The next morning, the first domino tipped. My contact at the credit union called. "Daniel, you were right to be concerned," she said. 3 months of missed payments on that business loan. We've frozen the line of credit. I thanked her and hung up, imagining Mark's next trip to buy supplies. Declined card. Embarrassed conversation. Another call to the lender that wouldn't go the way he hoped. By Thursday, the mortgage company had officially marked the account at risk. That status triggers internal protocols, fewer gray stays, faster referral to collections, and, my favorite, mandatory property inspections to verify occupancy. Translation: someone in a company jacket would be walking up their driveway with a clipboard while the neighbors pretended not to watch. That afternoon, I sat in Hale's office as he slid a thin envelope across the table. "Statement from their home equity line," he said. Maxed. Payments sporadic. Interest ticking up monthly. "They've been using the house like an ATM," Hale said. "Once that account hits default, the bank can demand a balloon payment." "And when they can't?" I asked. "They lose the house faster." I left his office with the envelope tucked into my coat and a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the wool lining. Friday morning, I drove past their street just in time to see the inspection officer snapping photos of the siding and gutters. Mark came out in a rush, wearing the brittle smile of a man trying to convince himself and everyone else that nothing's wrong. It's a dangerous thing, that smile. It cracks under pressure. And pressure was all I planned to give them. That evening, Alicia tried one last polite approach. "Uncle Daniel, please. We're droning here. Just a short-term loan. I swear we'll pay it back." I read it twice, remembering the exact same promise she'd made 5 years ago about a one-time mortgage catch-up. That loan had turned into years of monthly payments that ended the day I told the bank to stop. No reply. By Saturday, the polite tone was gone. "If you don't help us, you're going to regret it." They didn't know it yet, but the regret wasn't mine to carry. The lenders were circling, the credit was collapsing, and I was just a name in the records, a name with no assets left to claim. I'd pulled the safety net out from under them. Now gravity was doing the rest. And the fall was only getting started. The first public crack came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the corner booth at Brookside Cafe, same place I've been going for years, the kind of spot where the waitress knows your order before you sit down, when the door banged open hard enough to make the bells above it ring twice. It was Mark. Not the confident, loud Mark I'd seen at family barbecues. This one looked smaller inside his coat, his jaw tight, his phone clutched like a lifeline. He didn't notice me. He was too busy pacing near the counter, voice sharp and desperate into the receiver. "No, I told you, it's a temporary cash flow issue." "No, that's not listen. I said we'll make the payment Friday. We're just waiting on a check to clear." "Hello?" He pulled the phone away, stared at the screen, then slammed it into his pocket. The room went quiet for a beat before the low murmur of breakfast conversation started up again. I sipped my coffee and let the moment burn into my memory. Panic doesn't stay contained. It seeps into everything. By Thursday, Alicia's name popped up in my voicemail. I played it on speaker at my desk while sorting the week's paperwork. "Uncle Daniel, we just got served a notice. They're saying foreclosure proceedings could start in 60 days. I don't know what to do. Please call me." I didn't. That afternoon, I received an email from a contact at Northwest Mortgage Services, one of the more cautious lenders in town. Daniel, as cosigner, you have the right to request early settlement due to breach of payment terms. Based on our current assessment, the account is high risk. Let me know if you'd like to move forward. I didn't respond right away. I wanted the pressure to build a little longer. Friday brought a bonus. A neighbor of theirs, someone I know through the Rotary Club, called me. Daniel, what's going on with your niece? Saw an inspector over there again this morning. And, heard some yelling when I was walking the dog. Perfect. The neighbors were starting to notice. In neighborhoods like theirs, reputation is currency. Once it starts dropping, the isolation follows fast. On Saturday, I got a glimpse of that isolation in motion. I'd driven past their block, slower this time, just in time to see Alicia out front with a woman I recognized, a friend, who'd been at their summer parties. The friend's arms were crossed, her face stiff. I just can't, I heard her say, voice carrying across the yard. We've got our own bills. I'm sorry, Alicia. She walked away, leaving Alicia standing on the porch, hugging herself against the cold. That night, Mark tried his hand at intimidation. A single text, "You're destroying us. This will come back on you." I stared at it for a long moment, the kind of stare that turns into a smile. Because that's when I knew they weren't negotiating anymore. They weren't strategizing. They were flailing. And people who flail make mistakes, the kind that speed up the fall. By the time the first frost glazed the streets, they'd stopped trying to hide it. The blinds in their living room stayed drawn all day. The driveway was empty more often than not. When the truck was there, it sat in the same spot for days, a layer of dirt on the fenders, the tires edging toward flat. I didn't need binoculars to know what was happening inside that house. I'd seen it before in my banking years, the drawn-out collapse of people who've been living 2 months ahead of their income for too long. First comes the panic, then the calls, then the avoidance. Finally, the silence. Except this time, I controlled the silence. Hale and I met at his office to go over the lender's responses. Every account I'd flagged was now officially marked as in default or at high risk. That meant 2 things, tighter payment deadlines and far less patience for excuses. Mark's business loan is officially accelerated, Hale said, sliding the paperwork toward me. Full balance due in 30 days. I scanned the page, and if it's not, they'll file for judgment, garnish wages, and start seizing assets. Assets was a generous term for what they had left. The house was the only thing of value, and with the home equity line maxed and the mortgage behind, the bank was already preparing to claim it. The next move was simple. I made 3 phone calls, not to them, but to 3 other people in their lives who'd matter more. First was to the dealership where Mark had gotten his truck. I inquired, as a concerned cosigner, whether the insurance coverage was still valid given his recent payment delays. That question alone would trigger a review. If they found any lapse, the truck could be repossessed without warning. Second was to Alicia's credit card issuer. I requested a fraud alert on any future charges that exceeded $500. Perfectly legal, as cosigner on one account, I had that right. It meant every essential purchase she tried to make from then on would require extra verification. Embarrassing, time-consuming, frustrating. Third was to the small private school her 2 kids attended. I'd been paying part of the tuition for years quietly, without thanks, until I cut it off. I called the bursar's office and asked, purely for accounting purposes, whether the family was current on their payments. They weren't. 2 months behind, the bursar admitted, lowering her voice. We've sent reminders. That's all I needed to know, I said, and hung up. The following week, the chain reaction began. Tuesday morning, Mark's truck was gone from the driveway. Not in use, gone. The repo company's flatbed had been in and out before sunrise. By noon, Alicia was on Facebook posting a vague status about hard times and fake friends. Wednesday, a friend from the school board told me Alicia's kids had been temporarily withdrawn until tuition could be brought current. In a neighborhood like theirs, that sort of thing spreads faster than wildfire. Thursday, I was at the hardware store when I spotted Mark in the next aisle. He didn't see me. He was hunched over his phone, voice low, telling someone we might have to sell. I don't know. The bank's breathing down our necks. Yeah, I know what'll happen if we don't. By Friday, they called me again, together this time. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened. Alicia's voice cracked first. Uncle Daniel, we can't keep this up. We'll lose everything. Please. I don't care what happened before, we just need, Mark cut in. Name your terms. Whatever you want, just help us stop this before it's too late. I replayed it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because after all these weeks of silence, it was satisfying to hear the panic fully bloom in their voices. I didn't respond. Not yet. Not until every door they might run to is bolted shut. Saturday morning, I made one final call to the mortgage company. As co-signer, I'm withdrawing all willingness to restructure or refinance on the current property. If they want to keep the house, they'll have to pay in full, on time, every month. Otherwise, I support foreclosure. The representative paused, maybe surprised at my bluntness. Understood, sir. We'll note your position in the file. When I hung up, I looked at the clock. It was 9:14 a.m. By 9:15, they were out of lifelines. It happened on a Sunday morning. I was in the backyard pruning the rose bushes, Maria's roses, when I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel drive. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. The air itself felt tighter, like it does right before a storm. Uncle Daniel. Alicia's voice was thin, frayed at the edges. I turned. She stood there in a coat too light for the cold, eyes red, makeup smudged. Mark was beside her, hands in his pockets, jaw working like he was chewing words he didn't want to say. Morning, I said, going back to the roses. You're up early. We need to talk, Alicia said, glancing at Mark like she needed his permission to keep going. I can hear you just fine from here, I said, clipping another branch. Mark stepped forward. Look, we know you're angry about the hospital. No, I cut in, I'm not angry. Anger's temporary. I'm done with temporary. That stopped him. Alicia's voice cracked. We're going to lose the house, Uncle. They gave us 30 days to come up with everything we owe or they'll take it. The kids, I set down the clippers and looked at her fully for the first time. The kids go to a school you can't pay for. You drive cars you can't afford. You live in a house you were betting on inheriting instead of paying off. And now you want me to fix it? She blinked hard, fighting tears. We'll do whatever you want. Just help us. Mark's turn. Name your price. We'll sign anything. We'll pay interest. Just give us a loan to clear the arrears. You can't even clear the interest on what you already owe, I said. And you think I'm going to hand you more? His voice rose. We're family. I took a slow step toward them. Family is who picks you up from the hospital. Family is who doesn't leave you to figure out how to get home after open heart surgery. Family doesn't plan their future around your death. Alicia swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. And the only reason you're here now is because the banks have stopped answering your calls. They both stood silent, the wind rattling the bare branches overhead. I leaned in just enough that my words wouldn't carry beyond them. You have 28 days before the foreclosure notice hits your door. Use them however you want. But I'm done being your safety net. Mark's jaw tightened. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. No, you will. I picked up the clippers and turned back to the roses. Behind me, their footsteps crunched on the gravel, fading toward the car. The engine started, then cut out. Uncle, Alicia's voice again, smaller this time. I didn't turn. The car doors slammed. Tires spun on the frost. Then they were gone. The yard was quiet again, except for the soft snip of the clippers. They'd come to me with desperation in their eyes, thinking I'd still be the man who solved their problems. They'd left knowing the truth. That man was gone. And the man who replaced him was counting down the days. The notice went up on their door the morning of the 29th day. Big block letters and read, Notice of Trustee's Sale. I didn't have to see it in person. Hale sent me a copy from the Public Records Office, complete with the date the bank would auction the house. 37 days from now. That evening they came. No warning this time, just the jarring slam of car doors and the pounding of fists on my front door. I opened it slow, making them stand there in the cold a little longer. Mark's eyes were bloodshot, his voice raw. You did this. I leaned on the doorframe. The bank did this. I just stopped covering for you. Alicia stepped forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper, the notice. We have nowhere to go, Uncle. You can't let this happen. I can, I said, and I am. Mark's tone shifted to pleading. Please, just pay the arrears. We'll sell the place ourselves, pay you back, get a fresh start. No, I said, calm as stone. Why? Alicia's voice cracked. Why are you doing this to us? I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. Because when I needed you, you left me. And because every dollar I've ever given you has been one more rope you used to hang yourselves with debt you couldn't afford. I'm cutting that rope. Mark shook his head, half in disbelief, half in anger. This is revenge. This, I said, is accountability. Alicia's lip trembled. We're family. I leaned closer, my voice low. You remember that word now. But a month ago, family was the last thing on your mind when you left me in a hospital bed. Mark's composure broke. His voice rose. You'll regret this when we're on the street. No, I said, straightening. You'll regret every choice that put you there. And when you do, you'll remember this conversation. For a moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the cold wind rattling the bare branches above us. Finally, Alicia asked in a whisper, so that's it. That's it, I said. 37 days. Make them count. I opened the door, stepped back inside, and shut it in their faces. The deadbolt clicked like a gavel. Through the window, I watched them walk back to the car, not speaking to each other, not even looking up. In 37 days, the bank would take the house, and I'd be there to watch them hand over the keys. Auction day came cold and clear. The courthouse steps were busier than usual, a half-dozen properties up for sale, a crowd of investors in heavy coats waiting to pounce on distressed real estate. I stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in my pockets, watching the clerk shuffle papers. Lot 4, 118, Maple Crest Drive. Their house. Bidding started low, it always does, and climbed in steady, mechanical increments. Mark and Alicia weren't there. They didn't need to be. The moment the gavel fell, their ownership was gone. I didn't bid. I wasn't here for the property. I was here for the ending. When the sale closed, the clerk read the winning bidder's name, recorded it, and moved on. Just like that, the house I'd once helped them buy, the one they'd assumed they'd inherit, belonged to someone else. I walked away before the crowd dispersed. My part in this was finished. That evening, I took the long way home, past Maple Crest Drive. The curtains were open now, boxes stacked in the living room, the walls stripped bare. Mark was carrying a lamp to the car, his shoulders hunched, movement slow. Alicia was on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. I didn't slow down. Back home, I poured a glass of Maria's favorite wine, the one I'd been saving for no reason. Tonight was reason enough. I sat at the kitchen table, the winter light fading, and thought about everything they'd taken, the years of payments, the favors, the trust. I thought about the moment in that hospital bed when I realized they were gone, and about the 37 days it took to make sure they could never do it again. Revenge isn't about rage. Rage burns too hot, too fast. Revenge is cold. It's deliberate. It waits until the right moment, then moves without hesitation. They left me in a hospital bed. I left them with debt they couldn't escape. And tonight, for the first time in years, I slept with the kind of peace you only get when you've cut away every rotten branch and left nothing but clean, bare wood for spring to grow from.